My name is Lauren, 32 years old, and that lake house was my sanctuary. My grandfather left it to me in his will, a place filled with cherished memories and dreams for the future. Then I returned from a business trip to discover strangers living there. My parents had secretly sold my lake house to fund my sister's extravagant $150,000 wedding. The betrayal cut deep, but they never anticipated what would happen when they crossed me. I was done being the family doormat. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family betray your trust. Trust me, you'll want to see how this story unfolds. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Traverse City, Michigan. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we were comfortable enough. My father Harold worked as a high school principal, and my mother Diane was an elementary school teacher. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family, but appearances can be deceiving. My sister Jasmine is 4 years younger than me. Growing up, she was always the center of attention. The pretty one, the dramatic one, the one who could wrap our parents around her little finger with just a pout and a few tears. While I was the responsible, practical daughter who excelled in school and rarely caused trouble. Jasmine was the one who needed constant attention and validation. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister. But I always felt like I was living in her shadow, even though I was the older one. No matter what I achieved, it never seemed quite enough to get the same level of excitement from my parents as Jasmine's minor accomplishments. The one person who truly saw me was my grandfather, Walter. He was my father's father, a retired architect who inspired my own career path. We shared a special bond over our love of design, natural landscapes, and quiet moments. While the rest of the family was loud and bustling, Grandpa Walter and I could sit in comfortable silence for hours, fishing off the dock of his lake house. That lake house was magical. It sat on 5 acres of wooded property, with 200 feet of private shoreline on Lake Michigan. The structure itself was a gorgeous 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom cabin with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. There was a massive stone fireplace in the living room that Grandpa had built himself, and a wraparound deck where we would watch the sunrise with cups of hot chocolate. The property even had a small boathouse and private dock where Grandpa kept his fishing boat. When Grandpa Walter passed away 5 years ago, I was devastated. He was 87 and had lived a full life, but the loss still hit me hard. At the reading of his will, everyone was shocked when he left the lake house specifically to me. The will was very clear, stating that the property was to pass directly to me, his granddaughter Lauren, as I was the only one who truly appreciated its value beyond the financial aspect. Jasmine was upset, of course. She threw a fit right there in the lawyer's office, claiming it wasn't fair. My parents tried to convince me to sell it and split the money, but I refused. This wasn't about the money for me. This was about preserving the special place that held so many memories of the person who had truly understood me. Over the next 5 years, I poured my heart, soul, and a significant portion of my savings into maintaining and improving that property. I replaced the roof, updated the plumbing, and carefully restored the original wood floors. I was even making plans to expand the business I had started, renting it out as a vacation property when I wasn't using it myself. The income was modest but growing, and I had dreams of eventually buying adjacent properties to create a small lakeside retreat business. Every major holiday and at least 1 weekend a month, I would drive the 3 hours from my apartment in Grand Rapids to spend time at the lake house. It was my sanctuary, my piece of heaven, and the place where I felt closest to the one person who had always believed in me. Little did I know that my sanctuary would become the centerpiece of the biggest betrayal of my life. The tension in our family began to build about a year ago when Jasmine announced her engagement to Cameron Whitfield, the son of a successful real estate developer. Cameron came from money, lots of it, and from the moment they got engaged, it became clear that this wasn't going to be a simple wedding. At first, I was genuinely happy for my sister. She seemed truly in love, and Cameron appeared to be a decent guy who adored her. I offered to help with wedding planning and even suggested they could use the lake house for their engagement photos, which they did. Looking back, I should have seen the way Jasmine looked at the property that day, not with appreciation, but with calculation. As the months passed, Jasmine's wedding plans grew increasingly extravagant. What started as a reasonable celebration morphed into a production worthy of royalty. She booked the Grand Traverse Resort, the most expensive venue in the region. Her dress was custom designed by an up-and-coming designer with a $15,000 price tag. The flower budget alone was $20,000. Every family dinner became a wedding planning session. No matter what else was happening in anyone's life, the conversation always circled back to Jasmine's big day. When I tried to share news about a major project I'd landed at my architecture firm, my mother nodded politely before asking Jasmine about her decision on the bridesmaid dress colors. I tried to be supportive, I really did. I attended cake tastings, helped address invitations, and even agreed to be the maid of honor despite my growing unease about the scale of this event. But Jasmine's behavior became increasingly entitled. She expected everyone to drop everything for her wedding whims. When I couldn't make a last-minute bridesmaid dress fitting because of an important client meeting, she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. During this time, I noticed my parents seemed stressed. Dad had developed a nervous tic in his left eye, and Mom had lost weight. When I asked if everything was okay, they brushed me off, saying they were just busy with wedding preparations. At one point, I overheard them arguing about money in the kitchen, but they went silent when I walked in. I suspected they were struggling with the wedding costs, so I offered to help financially. I had been doing well at my firm and had some savings beyond what I was putting into the lake house. But my parents declined firmly, almost defensively. Dad got unusually angry, saying they didn't need my charity. That should have been another red flag. In hindsight, there were other warning signs I missed. Mom asked for a tour of the lake house, taking photos of every room with unusual attention to detail. Dad inquired about the property values in the area, claiming he was just curious about real estate trends. And most suspiciously, they asked to borrow the spare key I kept in our family's emergency lockbox, saying they wanted to surprise me by having the place cleaned professionally. But I was distracted by my own life. My architecture firm had assigned me to a major project in Europe, a sustainable community development in Switzerland that required me to be overseas for 3 weeks. Before I left, I stopped by my parents' house to say goodbye and found Jasmine in tears over the venue threatening to cancel due to a missed payment. Again, I offered help, and again my parents shut me down immediately. My mother practically pushed me out the door, insisting I focus on my trip and not worry about family matters. If only I had pushed harder, asked more questions, or followed my instincts. Maybe I could have prevented what happened next, but I didn't. I got on that plane to Switzerland completely unaware that my family was about to betray me in the worst possible way. After 3 exhausting but successful weeks in Europe, all I wanted was to spend a quiet weekend at my lake house. The project had been intense with long days and high-pressure meetings. I had dreamed about sitting on my deck watching the sunset over Lake Michigan, letting the peaceful surroundings wash away my stress. I drove straight from the airport to the lake house, not even stopping at my apartment to drop off my luggage. As I turned down the familiar tree-lined road, I felt myself beginning to relax. But when I pulled into the driveway, my heart stopped. There was an unfamiliar SUV parked where I usually left my car, and the flower beds I had so carefully maintained had been completely re-landscaped. At first I thought I must have made a wrong turn, but no, this was definitely my property. Confused and alarmed, I approached the front door and knocked. A stranger, a woman around my age, answered with a smile that quickly faded when she saw my expression. "Can I help you?" she asked. "What are you doing in my house?" I demanded. Her husband appeared behind her, looking equally confused. "This is our house," he said. "We purchased it a month ago." I thought they must be confused, or maybe this was some elaborate prank. But then the husband retrieved their purchase documents, and there it was in black and white. My lake house had been sold for $800,000 to Brian and Amanda Thompson on June 15th, just 2 weeks after I'd left for Europe. The world tilted beneath my feet. There had to be a mistake. I hadn't sold my house. I would never sell my house. But as the couple showed me more paperwork, including the deed transfer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My signature, or what appeared to be my signature, was on the documents. But I had never signed them. I had never even seen them before. I managed to maintain enough composure to apologize to the confused couple and stumble back to my car before completely falling apart. Sitting in the driver's seat, I sobbed uncontrollably, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This couldn't be happening. The lake house, my sanctuary, my connection to Grandpa Walter, my business investment, my future plans all gone without my knowledge or consent. With shaking hands, I called my parents. No answer. I called my sister. Straight to voicemail. I tried my parents again and again, growing increasingly frantic with each unanswered call. Finally, I opened Instagram, thinking I might find clues about where they were. That's when I saw it. Jasmine had just posted a series of professional photos from her wedding, which had apparently taken place the previous weekend while I was still overseas. The caption read, "The perfect day I always dreamed of, worth every penny of the $150,000 we spent to make it magical." $150,000. Almost exactly what would be left from the sale of my lake house after paying off the small mortgage I had taken out for the renovations. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. My parents had sold my lake house, forged my signature, and used the money to fund Jasmine's extravagant wedding. All while I was out of the country. All without telling me. All behind my back. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that I couldn't process it. I sat in my car outside what used to be my property for nearly an hour, cycling through shock, disbelief, and rage. How could they do this to me? How could they take something so precious, something that wasn't even theirs to take? When the initial shock finally subsided enough for me to drive, I headed straight for my parents' house. I needed answers. I needed to look them in the eye when they tried to justify what they had done. I arrived at my parents' suburban home just as they were sitting down to dinner. Through the dining room window, I could see them along with Jasmine and Cameron laughing and talking animatedly. They looked happy, carefree. It was as if they hadn't just destroyed a piece of my soul. I didn't knock. I used my key and walked straight in, making my way to the dining room. The conversation halted abruptly when they saw me. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. My father's face drained of color. Jasmine looked momentarily startled before composing herself. Only Cameron seemed genuinely confused by the sudden tension. "Lauren," my mother exclaimed with forced brightness, "we didn't know you were back from Europe. Why didn't you call first? I would have said another place." The normalcy she was attempting to project made my blood boil. "Where's my lake house?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father cleared his throat. "Lauren, let's discuss this later in private. We have guests." "Cameron is family now," I said, my eyes not leaving my father's face. "And I want an explanation now. Why did you sell my lake house without my permission? How did you forge my signature? And how dare you use that money for Jasmine's wedding?" Cameron's head snapped toward my parents, genuine shock on his face. Clearly, he hadn't been privy to this particular detail about their wedding funding. My mother attempted damage control. "Honey, please calm down. We were going to tell you when you got back. We knew you'd be upset at first, but we had good reasons." "What possible reason could justify selling property that wasn't yours to sell?" I demanded. My father finally spoke up, his tone defensive. "The wedding venue was going to cancel without the final payment. We had already invested so much. Jasmine would have been devastated." "So you committed fraud? You stole from me. You took away the one thing that mattered most to me because Jasmine wanted an overpriced party." Jasmine finally entered the conversation, her tone indignant. "It wasn't just a party, it was my wedding day. The most important day of my life. We tried everything else, but there was no other way to get the money in time." "You could have scaled back the wedding," I suggested, my voice rising. "You could have been reasonable instead of spending $150,000 on a single day." "You're just jealous," Jasmine spat. "You've always been jealous of me. You didn't even want to be part of my special day. You chose that work trip over my final fittings." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wasn't even invited to the wedding. You had it while I was overseas. My mother intervened. We moved the date up because of venue availability. We tried to reach you, but you were so busy with your project. Liar, I shouted beyond caring about civility now. You deliberately scheduled it when I couldn't attend because you knew what you'd done. You couldn't face me. My father stood up, attempting to regain control of the situation. Lauren, we were desperate. We planned to pay you back. We've already started a savings account. In a few years, we'll have enough to reimburse you. A few years. And what about my memories? What about the business I was building? What about Grandpa's wishes that the property stay with me? Your grandfather would have wanted to help his family in a time of need, my mother insisted. That pushed me over the edge. Don't you dare speak for him. He left that property to me because he knew exactly what would happen if he left it to you. He knew you would always prioritize Jasmine over everything else. The ugly truth of years of favoritism hung in the air between us. No one denied it because they couldn't. We're your parents, my father said, his voice hard. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the good of the whole family. You didn't make this decision for the family, I said, trembling with rage. You made it for Jasmine like you've made every decision my entire life. And it wasn't your decision to make. That lake house was mine. Mine. Not yours to sell, not yours to sign away, and certainly not yours to sacrifice for her wedding. Jasmine rolled her eyes. You're being so dramatic. It's just a house. You can buy another one someday. In that moment, looking at my sister's complete lack of remorse, my parents' self-righteous defensiveness, and the realization that they saw nothing wrong with what they had done, something broke inside me. And at the same time, something hardened. This isn't over, I said, my voice now eerily calm. What you've done is illegal. It's fraud. It's theft. And I promise you, there will be consequences. As I turned to leave, my mother called after me. Lauren, don't do anything you'll regret. We're family. Families forgive each other. I paused at the door and looked back at them, these people who were supposed to love and protect me. You stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth less than a party. And forgiveness, that's earned. You haven't even started to earn it. With that, I walked out, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. They thought they knew me. They thought I would eventually calm down, fall back in line, and accept what they had done like I had accepted being second best all my life. They had no idea what was coming. The week after discovering my family's betrayal was the darkest period of my life. I took time off work, barely left my apartment, and cycled through grief, rage, and despair. I couldn't eat or sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lake house, felt the cool breeze off the water, heard my grandfather's laugh echoing across the dock. All of it stolen from me by the people who should have protected my interests above all others. After days of emotional paralysis, I finally reached out to my friend Taylor, who happened to be a real estate attorney. I had designed her family's home 2 years earlier, and we had become close during the process. When I told her what had happened, her professional demeanor momentarily slipped. They did what? She exclaimed. Lauren, that's not just morally reprehensible, it's criminal. Forging signatures on property documents is fraud. You could press charges. The thought of taking legal action against my own parents was overwhelming, but Taylor helped me see the situation clearly. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about justice. They stole something precious from you, something irreplaceable. And if they face no consequences, what's to stop them from doing it again? Taylor agreed to look into the situation for me. A few days later, she called with news that rekindled my fighting spirit. I've reviewed your grandfather's will and the property deed, she said. There's something your parents either missed or ignored. Your grandfather included a specific clause prohibiting the sale of the property without your explicit consent for a period of 10 years after his death. He wanted to ensure you wouldn't be pressured into selling. This means the sale to the Thompsons isn't just fraudulent. Because of the forged signature, it's in direct violation of the terms of your inheritance. This revelation changed everything. Not only had my parents committed forgery, but they had also violated my grandfather's explicit wishes. It was as if he had anticipated something like this might happen and had tried to protect me even after his death. Armed with this knowledge, I began to develop a plan, not just for legal recourse, but for a complete reckoning that would force my family to face the consequences of their actions. I spent hours with Taylor outlining a three-part strategy. First, the legal consequences. We would document the forgery and the violation of the will's terms. We would gather evidence of my whereabouts during the sale to prove I couldn't have signed the documents. We would prepare to file criminal charges if necessary. Second, financial justice. We would demand full restitution not just of the sale price, but also compensation for the business income I had lost, and would continue to lose plus damages for emotional distress. The total would far exceed what they had gained from the sale. Third, emotional closure. This was perhaps the most important part for me. I needed my family to acknowledge what they had done to understand the depth of their betrayal and to make genuine amends before I would consider any kind of relationship with them in the future. As I worked on my plan, my professional life suffered. I missed deadlines snapped at colleagues and struggled to focus on designs. My boss, concerned about my performance, called me into his office. Rather than make excuses, I told him the truth. To my surprise, he was incredibly supportive. "Take the time you need to sort this out," he said. "Your position will be here when you're ready to return." Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind. His understanding gave me the space I needed to focus on reclaiming my power. In the process, I discovered who my true friends were. People like my colleague Sophia, who brought me dinner when I was too distraught to cook. My neighbor Jake, who walked my dog when I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. My college roommate Zoe, who flew in from Chicago just to sit with me while I cried and raged. These people, who had no blood obligation to care for me, showed me more love and support than my own family had. They helped me see that I wasn't alone, that I had value, and that what had happened to me was genuinely wrong, not just a family disagreement where everyone shares some blame. As the shock wore off and my determination grew, I realized something important. This wasn't just about getting back at my family. This was about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. For too long, I had accepted being overlooked, being the responsible one who never made waves. But this time, they had gone too far, and I wasn't going to let it stand. With my evidence gathered and my resolve strengthened, I was ready to execute the perfect revenge, a response so precisely calibrated to their betrayal that they would never forget the consequences of crossing me. 2 weeks after discovering what my family had done, I sent them a formal legal notice drafted by Taylor. The document outlined in excruciatingly specific detail the laws they had broken, the terms of the will they had violated, and the potential consequences they faced, including criminal charges for fraud and forgery that could result in significant fines and even jail time. I had the document delivered by courier while they were all having Sunday dinner, a family tradition I was now excluded from. According to the delivery confirmation, my father had signed for it at 6:15 p.m. By 6:30, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts, which I ignored. The next day, I showed up at the high-end boutique where Jasmine worked as a sales manager. I waited until she was with a customer, then approached with a folder containing copies of the forged documents, along with a forensic handwriting analysis Taylor had commissioned, proving the signature wasn't mine. "We need to talk," I said quietly when the customer stepped away to try on a dress. "About these." Jasmine's face went pale as she saw what I was holding. "Not here," she hissed. "I'm working." "Funny how you care about your job now," I replied. "You didn't seem concerned about my career or my property when you were planning your wedding." Her manager approached, sensing tension. "Is everything okay, Jasmine?" I smiled pleasantly. "Just a family matter. I'm Jasmine's sister, discussing some property documents she and my parents forged while I was out of the country. You know, normal family stuff." Jasmine's eyes widened in horror as her professional facade crumbled. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back room. "Are you trying to ruin me?" she demanded once we were alone. "No," I said calmly. "That would be you and our parents. I'm just making sure everyone faces the consequences of their actions." For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw a flicker of fear in my sister's eyes. What do you want? Justice, I replied simply. Taylor Black's office tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bring Mom, Dad, and Cameron. Don't make me come find you again. Next time it might be with the police. I left her standing there surrounded by luxury items that suddenly seemed as hollow as her character. Later that evening, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. My mother was in tears, my father agitated and defensive. We need to talk about this, Lauren, he insisted. We can work it out as a family without lawyers. Like you worked out selling my lake house as a family, I asked, blocking their entry. No, we meet tomorrow with my attorney present, or we meet in court. Those are your only options. We're your parents, my mother pleaded. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. How can you do this to us? That's rich coming from you, I said, unmoved by her tears. And it's precisely because you're my parents that this betrayal cuts so deep. If you want to salvage any relationship with me, you'll be at that meeting tomorrow. The next day, they all showed up at Taylor's office, subdued and nervous. Cameron looked particularly uncomfortable, sitting slightly apart from my sister, as if trying to distance himself from the situation. I maintained a calm, professional demeanor throughout the meeting, which seemed to unnerve them more than if I had been emotional. Taylor presented our findings methodically, including the clause in the will, the forged signatures, and the timeline, proving I was out of the country when the documents were supposedly signed. Given the evidence, Taylor concluded, we have grounds for both civil action to void the sale and recover damages and criminal charges of fraud and forgery. However, my client is willing to consider a settlement that would avoid criminal proceedings provided certain conditions are met. My parents exchanged panicked looks. My father, his voice strained, asked, "What conditions?" I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. First, full financial restitution. Not just the $800,000 from the sale, but an additional $200,000 for the lost business income, the emotional distress, and the legal fees. $1 million total. That's impossible, my mother exclaimed. We don't have that kind of money. You should have thought of that before you sold property that wasn't yours, I replied evenly. You can take out loans, sell your house, use your retirement funds. I don't care how you get it, but you will pay back every penny. What else? My father asked, his face ashen. A public apology. You will acknowledge what you did in writing, and copies will be sent to our extended family and your colleagues who attended the wedding. Everyone should know exactly how that extravagant celebration was funded. Jasmine made a choking sound. You want to humiliate us. I want accountability, I corrected her. And finally, all of you will attend therapy, both individual sessions and family counseling, for at least 6 months before I'll consider having any personal contact with you again. This is absurd, my father sputtered. We made a mistake, yes, but these demands are vindictive. Taylor intervened smoothly. Mr. Davis, I've advised my client that she would be well within her rights to pursue criminal charges given the severity of the offense. Compared to the potential consequences of that path, these terms are quite reasonable. Cameron, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Can I ask a question? If Lauren's signature was forged and the sale violated the terms of the will, what happens to the people who bought the house? The Thompsons. It was a good question, showing more concern for innocent bystanders than my own family had demonstrated. I nodded to Taylor, who explained, the Thompsons purchased the property in good faith, unaware of the fraudulent nature of the sale. While the sale could potentially be voided, my client has expressed that she doesn't wish to displace them. Instead, the settlement amount is calculated to allow Lauren to purchase a comparable property. Cameron nodded, then turned to Jasmine. You told me your parents were helping with the wedding because they wanted to. You never mentioned they sold your sister's house without her permission. The look of disgust on his face as he regarded his new wife and in-laws spoke volumes. I almost felt sorry for Jasmine in that moment. Almost. My father made one last attempt to reassert control. And if we refuse these terms, Taylor slid a folder across the table. Then these are the criminal complaints we'll file tomorrow morning. Fraud and forgery charges against all 3 of you, as you all benefited from and were complicit in the crime. Mr. Whitfield, of course, would not be included as he appears to have been unaware of the situation. The reality of their position finally seemed to sink in. My mother began to cry in earnest. My father's shoulders slumped in defeat. And Jasmine, for once in her life, was completely speechless. "You have 48 hours to accept the terms," I said, standing to leave. "After that, we proceed with criminal charges." As I walked out of the conference room, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no joy in seeing my family brought low, but there was a profound sense of validation. For the first time in my life, they were seeing me clearly. They were understanding that I would no longer accept being treated as an afterthought, a resource to be used for Jasmine's benefit. They had severely underestimated me, and they would never make that mistake again. 6 months after the settlement was signed, I stood on the deck of my new lakefront property, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The house wasn't the same as my grandfather's lake house. Nothing could ever replace that. But it was beautiful in its own right, with 5 acres of wooded land and 300 feet of shoreline on a quieter part of Lake Michigan. The legal battle had been settled more quickly than I expected. Once my family realized the seriousness of their situation, they had agreed to all my terms. My parents sold their house and took out loans to cover the settlement amount. The public apology had been painful for them but necessary for me. And somewhat to my surprise, they had all followed through on the therapy requirement. The fallout had been significant. My parents, both educators whose reputations had been built on integrity, faced social consequences when the truth came out. My father took early retirement. My mother transferred to a different school district. They now lived in a modest apartment, working to rebuild their finances and, more importantly, to understand the damage they had caused. Jasmine and Cameron's marriage had been strained to the breaking point by the revelation. They had separated briefly, but were now in counseling together. Jasmine had reached out to me several times, her messages showing a humility I had never seen from her before. Her last text had simply read, "I never realized how selfish I've been until I saw myself through your eyes. I'm so sorry, Lauren." I hadn't responded yet. Forgiveness would come in my own time, on my own terms. The therapist I had been seeing helped me understand that healing didn't mean rushing to reconcile. It meant honoring my feelings and setting healthy boundaries. And I had been healing. The architecture firm had welcomed me back, and I had thrown myself into my work with renewed passion. I had used part of the settlement money to start my own side business, a small but growing consultancy specializing in lakefront property development with an emphasis on environmental sustainability. The new property had become my personal project. I was slowly making it my own, incorporating elements that honored my grandfather's memory while creating something uniquely mine. On the mantel above the fireplace, I had placed the only item I had managed to retrieve from the old lake house, a hand-carved fishing lure that Grandpa Walter had made. My new circle of friends had been my lifeline through it all. They had helped me move, celebrated small victories, and sat with me through dark moments of doubt. They had shown me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands beside you when you need them most. As for my blood family, I was taking it one day at a time. We had begun limited supervised contact meeting occasionally in public places or with our therapists present. There were no quick fixes, no magical reconciliations. Trust, once shattered, could only be rebuilt slowly, piece by fragile piece. The hardest lesson I had learned was that sometimes the people who should love you the most can hurt you the deepest. But the most valuable lesson was discovering my own strength. I had finally stood up for myself, demanded respect, and refused to accept less than I deserved. I had also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing yourself to be vulnerable to the same hurt again. It means releasing the burning anger so it doesn't consume you while still maintaining the boundaries that protect you. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, I thought about my grandfather. I liked to think he would be proud of how I had handled things. Not just the legal battle, but the way I was moving forward, creating something new while honoring what was lost. Life rarely gives us neat, perfect endings. Relationships are messy, healing is not linear, and some wounds leave permanent scars. But I was at peace with where I stood now. I had survived the betrayal. I had fought for justice. And most importantly, I had discovered a resilience within myself that no one could ever take away. If you've ever been betrayed by family, I hope my story gives you courage. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you the villain. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for those who hurt you is to hold them accountable. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to family who crossed a line? How did you handle it? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to demand respect even from family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember you deserve to be treated with love and respect, especially by those who claim to love you most.